What is happening, guys? It is Tuesday afternoon, which means myself and Eric Lindquist are about to break down the upcoming Reignmakers slate, and we're going to be talking about golf today. Next week, though, UFC 290, which Eric Lindquist himself is going to be attending, and also we're going to be breaking that down. But Eric, and also people, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Why don't you tell people how you won tickets to UFC 290 next week?
Yes, so there were contests in the lobby for different tiers, whether it was core, rare, elite, and if you finished first, you won 2 tickets and 2 fan experience tickets for the Friday, Saturday for UFC 290. I'm going to be bringing my best friend from college, who is a diehard UFC fan, has only been to Vegas one time in his entire life, and has never stayed on the Strip. So we're staying at the Cosmopolitan, right across from T-Mobile Arena. We're going to be able to go hang out and have some fun. And we hit up our college buddy who is in the UFC, who we're going to be hopefully getting together with and maybe throwing a little dice if we get so lucky.
Or as my grandma calls it, T-Mobile. Not T-Mobile, T-Mobile Center. For whatever reason, she mispronounces every single phone call. Like even easy ones. Like she can't pronounce AT&T. She calls it ATT.
Why?
It's just whatever. She has to get every single phone company wrong, no matter what it is. Verizon, AT&T.
So, the only thing
T-Mobile.
I have that's kind of weird like that, it's a Midwest thing. And I think Jordan Klein's made fun of me for this before, but we say Best Buy, where we accent buy for no reason whatsoever. It's really annoying.
Yeah.
Instead of Best Buy.
She's just wrong, though. Like, this isn't her misprint. Like, there's nobody else who does this as she does. She just does it. It's just like, oh, it's technology. I don't know this. Therefore, I get all of the names wrong for everything.
Respect your elders, Craig.
You shouldn't pronounce AT&T wrong.
Probably not.
You shouldn't call it ATT. It's AT&T, but neither here nor there. Eric is going to be at UFC 290 at the T-Mobile Center next week. And if you guys want to play some of the different UFC contests for Reignmakers, they do have those every week now, where you could use the contest cards for that slate. And they're giving away tickets all the time. There's one of those that are up every single week for the UFC. So if you want to be cool like Eric and attend the events in person, you could do that by playing some of the UFC Reignmakers contests. But here, we're going to be talking about PGA, and would you say a little bit weaker of a field this week than the last couple of weeks, Eric?
Yeah. Well, you go from a US Open to an elevated event to whatever this is. But these are the weeks, people, where it is wide open and all of your cards have a lot more utility than they have during an elevated event where there is a limited number of combinations and things that work out for you. These are the weeks that if you've been holding on to, I mean, off the top of my head, like just saying the random Kevin Tways, the Lee Hodges, the Doug Gims, the Thomas Dietrichs of the world. If you have any of these fools, this is your week, friends.
And something else that we should add while we talk about this is that Ricky Fowler, there are no Reignmakers cards. So if you guys are looking at our free projections, which I'm about to drop into the YouTube channel, and if you guys are trying to figure out who it is, Ricky Fowler is not in the player pool. So that is something that if you can't find him, that is the reason why we should make note of that as we talk through some of the top golfers of the week. And I guess we should start right here at the top. And also I'll mention that if you guys haven't signed up for PGA Reignmakers, totally free starters pack that you can get by clicking on the link below. You're going to get a set of golfers that's going to help you build out some lineups, and then also a stud golfer of your choosing. Eric and I usually sit here and we tell you to go play Scotty Scheffler because he comes in the top of the field every tournament. Although with that said, he's not going to be in this particular tournament. Still probably makes sense to take. Just make Eric not feel terrible about like, oh look, Scotty Scheffler, another top 5 finish. Don't have to worry about him this week, but still, I think he is the golfer that we were most going to want to recommend you guys take in your starters pack, just because he's been such a stud this year. But what do you make of Tony Finau this week, Eric? 8.5% chance in our projections being the top overall scoring golfer, 25.5% chance of being a top 5 scoring golfer, basically him being in the optimal lineup. Is he your favorite golfer in the field this week?
No, but if you had Tony Finau, you're playing Tony Finau, you're absolutely jamming Tony Finau. There's really not any kind of an issue that you're going to run into with it. The guy won this event last year. It's a golf course that all intents and purposes should set up well for him here. I think it has more to do with his recent form, where I'm not like over the moon jamming him by any means. He comes off of 45th at the Travelers, 36th at the US Open, missed cut at the Charles Schwab. He's traveling with his family. He wins the Mexico Open. Not saying he's checked out, but the putter has been ice, baby. We're talking 5 straight weeks where he's lost at least 2 with the flat stick. And he's had those kind of issues before. He gets in these rhythms where the putter looks really, really good and he'll gain a ton. And then he gets through these stretches where it's just such a negative for him. At some point, he'll figure it out and just be flat across the board. But he is just so momentum based when it comes to that flat stick. And we are definitely on the wrong side of it here. I got to say that flat out, Ricky Fowler would be my favorite card if you did have a card of him here. But I think by default, it just turns into Colin Morikawa for me. I think he's the guy that at $8.74 for a core, sitting sub $45. If I had to start with one player this week in the captain spot, I'm clicking on Colin Morikawa in Reignmakers.
Interesting. So Morikawa, who's had some fairly terrible results as of late, we could dig into some of his recent results. And he's projecting really well for us. I'm curious, Jordan, can you pull up on screen what some of his core cards, like what the floor is for Morikawa? Because I imagine it's gone down a little bit as of late. So if I'm not mistaken, Eric, and you could correct me, he's been dealing with a back injury, correct?
No. Wrong. He withdrew with back spasms from the Memorial, but he was just fine. You saw him at the US Open. He put himself into contention, finished 14th, gained 5.5 with the approach. Last week is such an outlier. He lost 2.3 with the irons. It's the first time he's been negative with the irons since March of 2022. We're talking over a year and a half, or almost a year and a half, since the Players where he lost 1.7. One of the main things was he had a couple water balls there at that Players Championship. Same thing at the Travelers. It was just an off week. And there are a couple of players that I'm just going to throw out everything from the Travelers, mainly because you went from a US Open in California, traveling out to Connecticut, playing an elevated event on an easier golf course where some guys were able to just coast and chill because they weren't even in the US Open. So I'm going to be writing it off completely for him. The back thing is very overhyped. He is just fine.
All right. So no concerns at all about Morikawa.
None.
And if you could roster anybody in the captain spot this week, Morikawa is your choice then?
Done. And our projections kind of echo that. He's number 2. He's sitting behind Tony Finau. He's got a top player probability of 6.5%. He's a smidge over Homa, smidge over Sung Jae Im, actually quite a bit over Sung Jae Im. It's basically him and Finau, and I am pretty firmly in the camp of Colin Morikawa on this golf course.
Okay. So Colin Morikawa is going to be your guy over Tony Finau this week. And then some of the other golf, we really have 3 golfers that are projecting way better than everybody else in our projections. It's Tony Finau, Colin Morikawa, and then Max Homa. Those 3, which you all mentioned right there. And then the next tier of golfers, we've got Sung Jae Im, Tom Kim, Hideki Matsuyama, Justin Thomas, who's showing signs of life all of a sudden. And then also we've got Keegan Bradley, who's coming off his win from last week. So of this group, Im, Kim, Matsuyama, Thomas, Bradley, do any of them stand out above the rest?
How about Justin Thomas coming back to life? That was a good sign to see. He talked a little bit in press conferences about his need to just go out and play golf rather than trying to swing the golf club and think about the swing. Came off of back-to-back missed cuts at the Memorial, the US Open, finished 9th at the Travelers with a negative putter yet again, but gained 7.2 at the approach. There's going to be a day where it flips for him and he starts making putts above, what the field is. And this golf course, it's one that a lot of these top players, him, you're talking Morikawa, they haven't seen this place, but it doesn't really matter. It plays pretty easy. You go back through some of the tournament histories here. I think it's just really, I'll take the best players and for Reignmakers purposes and kind of figure it out elsewhere. Now, there are going to be a lot of players that put themselves in contention you wouldn't expect at something like the Memorial, the US Open, even the Travelers last week, where top players still found their way to the top of the leaderboard like you might expect in some of these spots. But this golf course is very gettable. I think in a birdie fest, I like Justin Thomas. I like Colin Morikawa. I like it when it's playing a little bit easier because they can just go low in a way where they gain so much with the approach that nobody else can touch on.
I do wonder with Justin Thomas too, how much some of the recent results, we should also consider what the events were, right? So PGA Championship, he makes the cut, but he finishes T65. So fairly shitty result. Misses the cut at the Memorial, misses the cut at the US Open, then comes top 10 at the Travelers. But that's a really, really difficult stretch of fields that he had been playing in. And it's not really comparable to what we have this week. So, like you said, we had the T9 last week. The putter still isn't there, but enough positive signs for you. Do you think this is the time to buy low on Justin Thomas?
Yeah, it's been kind of a wait and see approach. He's been somebody I've been pretty cautious with. Last week was a really good week to be jumping back on board. I think just because it was an easier golf course too, it got him in a little bit more of a rhythm. When you're a little bit off at a US Open or at the Memorial or at the PGA Championship, with the rough being as penal and difficult as what it is, you're going to get beat up pretty hard. And you're looking at Detroit Golf Club. That is not nearly what you're looking at with any of these previous events. Plays more like a Travelers, where it is very scoreable, not very penal off the tee. Going to be a spot where I think whether it's a bombing type like a Tony Finau, we've seen a lot of just bomber types here succeed. Justin Thomas can fall in that category. He does everything pretty well. It's not like he's some noted bomber by any means, but the approach specifically in these birdie fests, I like seeing those numbers starting to trend up. 7.2 strokes gained in that department last week. That is all I need to know, because around the green, he's as good as you get on the PGA Tour.
Now, the next part of these stud golfers, do you have a least favorite? Is there anybody from this top group that you're either looking to fade, or if somebody was looking to buy a card of in the secondary market, whether it be Sung J M or Tom Kim, you might say to them, don't consider that golfer?
Yeah, I'm not a huge Tom Kim guy this season. I think people have really overvalued his cards and overvalued him as a player. He came off of a 5th at the Century and a 6th at the American Express, where there wasn't even Reignmakers available. We didn't have that available to us there until that Waste Management Phoenix Open, the Players Championship specifically. And since then, you would not want to be anywhere near his cards until the US Open. That is the only result we have from him. 51st at the Players, 16th at the Masters, 23rd at the Wells Fargo, 34th at the AT&T, 3 missed cuts in that span. His putter, it is the only thing that I think makes him a superpower on the PGA Tour. When he goes out and gains 6.1, gained 12.5 in his win at the Wyndham back in 2022, you're seeing him lose strokes with the putter in 3 of his last 4, in 5 of his last 7, in 9 of his last 11 events on the PGA Tour. That is not going to get it done. Yes, the irons have really, really flipped for him. And if we see the putter be positive, you're probably going to see him contend, but it's such a ball striking, like, I don't even think he's that good of a ball striker long-term, that you start comparing it to some of these other top players. And I think they're just far more consistent than what you're going to get with a Tom Kim. Sure, we saw him have some good results when we went across the pond. So as we go to the Aberdeen Scottish Open, as we go to the Open Championship, there might be some extra utility there, but I do not look at him in the same way I look at a Homa, a Morikawa, a Finau, or a Thomas.
So then that leads into the next thing I wanted to ask you, and it's something that we've talked about a good amount during the summer months. And as we're getting into some of the major seasons, is we have the final major of the year. We've got the Open Championship about 3 weeks from now. And if we're looking at some of these stud golfers, are any of them ones that you liked for this week, but you also think have a little bit of added value because when the contests get bigger for the British Open in 3 weeks, like mid-late July, that it's somebody who is going to stand out as also being a good play for that tournament?
Yeah, I think where the prices currently sit at, you're probably better off going towards your top end guys, your Homas, your Finaus. They're not all that expensive. And this is a week where if you're trying to buy in now, it's a really good opportunity to maybe get to those rares or really stretching it to an elite, because the price is just, you're getting something back on it in terms of expected value this week. And as we get across the pond, I think Colin Morikawa sets up really well for Royal Liverpool. It's a golf course that Rory McIlroy was really, really good with his irons on. In his pathway, it was 7 years? It was a while ago that they had the Open Championship there, but it definitely is more target-based, hitting a lot of 2 irons, hitting a lot of greens, very flat. And you get on some of these flatter Open Championship type surfaces where it's scoreable. That's where I think if the weather is good, Colin Morikawa could really be a contender there yet again. He changes his iron setups. I know he did that last time around. It was the big key for him winning an Open Championship, was working with TaylorMade to find clubs that dug into the turf a little bit more effectively. And he's the best iron player on the planet. It's just routinely shown up that way. I like getting to his card over anybody else, considering he's less than $9 for a core. You're sitting at $42.99 for the low on the rare. I think he's a good buy-in. But as you're getting to the next tier for guys that I think have extra utility when we're talking about getting to the FedEx Cup playoffs, there's a guy in Austin Eckroat who's just coming to life. I was very, very early to the party with Austin Eckroat. I've had his cards right from the beginning. I actually had one of his elites that I sold like an absolute dunce cap. But either way, Austin Eckroat is really showing out what a lot of people were talking about him being capable of as we go into as he begins his career. He's out of Oklahoma State. He's always been known as just a grinder type, but off the tee, he's just been dominant. 11th in strokes gained off the tee amongst this entire field. I like him. I, of course, like Sepp Straka. This is a week where those mid-tier plays can really move themselves up the board here, get themselves into open championships, get themselves into maybe that East Lake championship. Those back end plays, if you can get those 20 to 30th ranked players that sneak their way into East Lake, you are looking at a Yahtzee kind of a card, and I think both of them are capable.
Eckroat projects really well for us this week. He's
on
the first page of our projection. So see, Jordan's got it up here on the screen. We've got Eckroat 1.5% chance to be the highest scoring golfer in the entire field, and then a 6.2% chance being top 5. So, we've got him right there with Cameron Davis and Keegan Bradley in our projections. If you look at the golfers who are right behind him, it's Brian Harmon, who finished 20 under par, if I remember correctly.
He was unbelievable chalk last week, and he just smashed.
Yeah, so
he's the only reason that I got drilled last week.
Brian Harmon, he's coming off a really good event. So those are the golfers that Eckroat is priced, or at least projected, in between in terms of our projections. So it definitely looks like we are in line with you as far as that goes. And there are a bunch of golfers then, once you get past that kind of upper tier, where there's just a ton of guys you're seeing like 1% chance to be the top scoring golfer, 5% chance to be a top 5 probability, not a whole ton differentiating them. So are there any long shots that you're liking for this week, Eric?
Yeah, Brandon Wu is somebody that I'm very interested in for Reignmakers purposes, for DFS purposes. He's not a household name by any means, but he had some really good results in some weaker field events. And that's what this is. You do have your top tier groupings of guys, but went to the RBC Canadian. In between 3 missed cuts, he puts up a 9th, because when that putter flips, everything else is pretty positive. He can gain a ton off the tee. The 3rd at the Mexico Open is what I'm highlighting the most, where you had Finau and Rahm in that grouping going 1-2. He finished right up there with everybody else there at that 3rd. Has a 2nd at the AT&T Pebble Beach, which was a very weak field this season as well. I think he's the kind of guy who elevates his game when he knows that he might be not necessarily the class of the field, but when he knows that he's very, very live. His miscuts, the Travelers Elevated event, the Memorial, the PGA Championship. I think we should be writing it off the same way we write off some of those results for Justin Thomas. Love what we see from him off the tee and approach-wise. Simply flipping that putter of a la Justin Thomas. If he could do that every single week, where he has gained 8.4, 6.3 at the RBC Canadian, he does that from time to time, and that's when you need Brandon Wu.
Hey, I'm a step ahead of you. I've already got 2 Brandon Woos, and I have a Dylan Wu. Not just because
don't play Dylan Wu.
Just because I have one, not because of any other reason than they just exist. I have one of his cards, but I already do have a couple of Brandon Woos. Certainly going to be playing him this week. You see, we've got Jordan on the screen over here, looking at some of the floor prices for who's he have up there? Sung Jae Im. It's hard for me to read what other players it is that he is searching over there. But looking at the rest of the field, Eric, and Brandon Wu, he's, pretty long shot here, 74-1 to end up winning. We do him with a 1% chance to end up being the top scoring golfer, 5.6% chance to be a top 5 scoring golfer.
There's also this part where we have to look at overall DK scoring, which is a little bit different than just what their results are. Obviously, they're very much correlated, especially on an easy golf course. You finish in the top 10, you probably made a ton of birdies, but he's 10th in DK scoring over the last 50 rounds amongst this entire field. That's pretty insane when you calculate that he has better DK scoring over those events than Justin Thomas, than Ben Martin, than Akshay Bhatia, who we don't have DK cards of, sadly, of Aaron Rye, who's somebody very popular, and even Austin Eckroat, Tom Kim. He's been better in DK scoring than all of them. And part of that is he doesn't always have access to all the top events, but he has this season. And that's a pretty impressive feat considering he has 3 missed cuts in that span.
Yeah, and I do think that that is something that's kind of interesting. By the way, that is all included in our projections and our data. It's not just who's going to win the tournament. It's also, who's somebody that's going to be a good DraftKings scorer and is going to put up good fantasy points. So that is what the actual top player probabilities, if anybody's looking at it, it's not what their odds are of winning the tournament, though obviously that correlates really highly to being a top scoring golfer, but it's who's going to score the most fantasy points for any given tournament. Same with the top 5, because somebody could finish, 8th in the tournament, but still ultimately end up scoring more fantasy points than somebody who finishes 5th. But with that in mind, let's say somebody's just watching this right now and maybe they don't really understand the concept. What is something that you would be looking at in a golfer that would make them more apt to score well for DraftKings purposes than maybe just place or make a cut in the tournament?
You could literally go into Cruncher or wherever you might use for an optimizer. You can group it by birdies made per round. You have to always be careful, though, because the context of which golf tournaments you're playing in a Corrales Punta Cana is a little bit different than playing in a US Open. You're going to see a lot of differences in scoring there, but for the most part, you can kind of pick and choose some players that might pop in terms of just number of birdies made. And bogey avoidance isn't really a thing here, because in DK scoring, yeah, you're going to make some bogeys, but your birdies and eagles can really make up for it. And so that's where a guy like Brandon Wu kind of jumps up to the top of the board. Even Dylan Wu is sitting in the top 15 in terms of DK scoring, but not necessarily known as that strong of a player. And he hasn't played in the PGA Championships, in the Memorial and things like that. So it does enhance his DK scoring because the events he does play in have easier golf courses attached to him. But that kind of context is something you should always be using when evaluating golfers.
Yeah, no, good context to have, because I do think there's going to be a lot of people who might look at our projections, which are free, drop them into chat before, and kind of wondering what some of the stuff that goes into it, where we might project somebody to have better top golfer odds or top 5 probability odds than what their odds might be to actually finish top 5 or win a tournament or anything like that. But now also, Eric, any long shots even beyond Brandon Wu that you like for this week? And if you don't have anybody, that's fine. He's 74 to 1 to win. Is there anybody who's like 100 to 1 or wider that you think is maybe a good investment for this tournament and could also have some more utility in future weaker field tournaments?
Yeah, I'm not sure what I've thought about putting him on my betting card specifically, but JJ Spawn is somebody that keeps jumping up in my modeling and everything that I'm doing here this week. He missed the cut at the Travelers. He's lost a lot with the putter over the course of this entire season. It's a really strange phenomenon because he's always been pretty neutral in that regard, but his tee to green game has still been awesome. We saw 30th at the Memorial, 6.2 strokes gained tee to green, gained 3.2 around the green, but still lost 2 at the putter. If he ends up flat, we've seen a lot of top 30 performances from him, a 27th at the Wells Fargo, 22nd at the Valero. Even at the beginning of this season, a weaker field that looks a lot like this, the Sony Open, he finished 12th. He is going to be on this PGA Tour run for the next however long. He has his card locked up, full status, because he won in San Antonio at the Valero last year. So I think JJ Spawn's like a huge dark horse of somebody who could just come from absolute obscurity. And he's going for what? What's his floor at? $1.44 or something right now at the moment. Seems like a pretty easy spot where, yeah, it might seem more expensive than some of the other ones that are going for 75 cents, 99 cents, but because he has that full status and knowing that he's going to play in every event leading up into and beginning the FedEx Cup playoffs, I think that's a card that has extra utility that might not be getting the same notoriety as other players that are $2, $3, $4.
So looking at our projections, this is our top projected golfer that's further than, or I should say longer than 100 to 1 to win the tournament. So I'm kind of curious to get your reaction on this. I've been thinking about this as like a fun way to add in a long shot to this, where I tell you who you like, and then I go through our projections. You're like, who do our projections like? That's 100 to 1 or longer. Hayden Buckley.
Oh, no.
His odds at DraftKings Sportsbook are 111 to 1 to win. In our projections, though, we do give him a 5.2% chance to be one of the top 5 scoring golfers based on your response of, oh no, it seems you might not like Hayden Buckley.
So this golf course does suit him a lot better than the last one. Last week, my big stand on Lindy's best 9 bets that I have over on the Odd Shopper Golf channel was Hayden Buckley to miss the cut. I thought it was a pretty easy bet. I thought it was a pretty straightforward play. He's now missed the cut in 4 straight. His odds had plus money attached to it, and I did not understand it in any way, shape, or form. He gained 2.3 with the putter and still missed that cut. Now, this golf course does set up more for the Bombers. We've seen Bryson DeChambeau, Tony Finau, number of players that, maybe don't pop in other golf tournaments. They're 2 of the elite players. How about we go to a Cameron Davis who's popping in our projections? He's a former winner here as well. Guys that don't necessarily pop at golf courses where get driving distance. This is definitely something that correlates with the winner a little bit more. Hayden Buckley is very strong off the tee. And I think that that's what our projections are kind of honing in on. The fact that over the course of his last 20 rounds, he's been pretty flat in every department of his golf game besides off the tee, where he's gaining nearly 2 strokes per round, which is kind of an insane number for a player that you might not otherwise think of as an elite player. Has a 5th and an RBC Heritage, which is a little bit more target golfy than this. 10th at the Valero, I think, correlates a little bit more with the projections like him. It's just coming off of a week where I was so bearish on him and betting against him there. Seeing the 4 missed cuts, it doesn't inspire greatness here.
His recent stretch of results are hilarious. If you just look at his box score, right? If you go tournament by tournament, he missed 4 cuts in a row. And I'm talking about earlier in the year now. So he misses 4 cuts in a row. Then he comes top 10 in the Valero Texas Open, top 5 in the RBC Heritage, 26th in the Zurich, 43rd in the Wells Fargo, 26th in the PGA Championship. Then he misses 4 cuts in a row again. This is quite the streaky golfer we have, based on, like, if you were to look at him, for instance, in Fantasy Cruncher, it would be the athletes I call the Christmas tree guys, where it's like red, green, red, green. So he has been all over the place. And the recent results have absolutely been terrible, like Eric mentioned. But just a minute left to go here. If you guys haven't done it yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Final part of the show here before we leave. Pick one golfer to win, Eric. Who is your most confident play to win the tournament?
Colin Morikawa.
All right. I'm going to go with Tony Finau because he's at the top of our projections. And is it a chalk answer? Is it a fish play? Does it make me a little bit soft? Am I weak? Am I not able to make a stand? Perhaps, but I'm going with Tony Finau.
At least you didn't say Cameron Davis. I'd be so upset with you.
All right. That's why he's not at the top of our projections, so I didn't say him. But anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching. And don't forget that if you want to check out PGA Reignmakers, totally free starters pack that you can get by clicking on the link below. Other than that, one more time, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Good luck. Eric and I will be back here next Tuesday talking about UFC 290.